Emily Carter stood frozen at the altar in her ivory gown, watching her future crumble in real time. Daniel Whitmore, the man she'd loved for 3 years, turned to face the crowd of 400 guests and spoke words that would destroy her. "I can't marry someone so beneath my family's standing. This was a mistake." The cathedral erupted in gasps and whispers. Emily's hands trembled as humiliation crashed over her like a wave. But in the back row, a dark-haired stranger in an expensive suit watched her with eyes that burned with something dangerous. And he'd been waiting for this moment. If you want to see how Emily rises from this betrayal, stay until the end. Hit like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The morning had started like a dream. Emily remembered standing in the bridal suite at St. Catherine's Cathedral, staring at herself in the full-length mirror while her sister Rachel fussed with the train of her dress. The gown had cost her 8 months of wages from the diner. Every double shift, every sore foot, every rude customer had been worth it for this moment. The lace sleeves felt delicate against her skin. The bodice fit perfectly. She looked like someone else, someone who belonged in a place like this. "You're shaking," Rachel said, adjusting the veil. "It's just nerves. Every bride gets them." Emily forced a smile. "I know." But it wasn't nerves. It was something else, something she couldn't name. A tightness in her chest that had been growing for weeks, ever since Daniel's mother, Catherine Whitmore, had taken over the wedding planning with the efficiency of a hostile corporate takeover. Every detail had been stripped from Emily's hands. The flowers, the music, the guest list, all of it controlled by a woman who looked at her like she was a stain on expensive fabric. "Daniel loves you," Rachel said, reading her face. "That's all that matters." Emily nodded, but the words felt thin. Did he? 3 years together, and she still couldn't shake the feeling that she was auditioning for a role she'd never quite land. Daniel Whitmore was everything she wasn't. Old money, political connections, a last name that opened doors she didn't even know existed. His father was a senator. His mother ran charity galas that raised millions. And Emily? She poured coffee and carried plates at Marco's Diner on 5th Street. 5 minutes, someone called from the hallway. Rachel squeezed her hand. "You ready?" Emily looked at herself one more time. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, poised, ready. She didn't recognize her. "Yeah," she said, "let's go." The cathedral was massive, all soaring ceilings and stained glass that threw colored light across the marble floors. Emily's heels clicked as she walked down the side corridor toward the main entrance, where her father waited to walk her down the aisle. She could hear the organ music swelling, the murmur of 400 guests settling into their seats. 400 people. She knew maybe 20 of them. Her father looked uncomfortable in his rented tux, tugging at the collar like it was strangling him. Tom Carter had worked construction his whole life, and fancy events made him twitchy. But when he saw her, his expression softened. "You look beautiful, Em." "Thanks, Dad." He offered his arm, and she took it, steadying herself. This was it. After today, she'd be Emily Whitmore. She'd have a husband, a future, a place in a world that had always felt just out of reach. All those nights working until her feet bled, all those times Daniel's friends had looked through her like she was invisible, it would all be worth it. The doors opened. The congregation rose as one, turning to look at her. Emily's breath caught. The aisle stretched out like a canyon, impossibly long, lined with white roses and candles. At the end, beneath the massive stone archway, stood Daniel. He looked perfect. Tailored tuxedo, dark hair styled just right. That easy confidence that came from never doubting you belonged exactly where you were. For a second their eyes met, and Emily felt a flutter of hope. Then she saw his face. Something was wrong. Daniel wasn't smiling. He looked pale, rigid, like someone had just delivered bad news. His jaw was tight. His mother stood in the front row, her expression carved from ice, and next to her sat Daniel's father, Senator Richard Whitmore, checking his phone with barely concealed impatience. Emily's steps faltered, but her father kept walking, pulling her gently forward. The music swelled around them, beautiful and terrible. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, tracking every step, judging, measuring. They reached the altar. Her father kissed her cheek and stepped back, leaving her alone with Daniel. The priest opened his book, ready to begin, but Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, staring at her like she was a problem he hadn't figured out how to solve. "Daniel?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned, not to the priest, but to the crowd. Emily's stomach dropped. "I need to say something," Daniel announced, his voice carrying across the cathedral. The music stopped. 400 people went silent. "Daniel, what are you doing?" Emily hissed, panic rising in her throat. He wouldn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the crowd, on his family, on everyone but her. "I can't do this," he said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily felt the world tilt. "What?" "I can't marry you." His voice was steady, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this. "This was a mistake. He paused, and in that pause, Emily saw everything she'd feared confirmed. "You're not right for my family. For my future. You're beneath our standing, and I won't tie myself to someone who doesn't belong in this world." The cathedral erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Someone's shocked laughter quickly stifled. Emily stood there, frozen, her brain struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare. She'd wake up in her apartment, and this would all be... "I'm sorry," Daniel said, but his eyes were empty. "This is for the best." Catherine Whitmore stood, smoothing her designer dress with a look of grim satisfaction. Senator Whitmore didn't even glance up from his phone, and Emily realized in that terrible moment that they'd known. They'd planned this. Daniel hadn't gotten cold feet. This was an execution. "You bastard," she breathed. She wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse. But her body wouldn't move. 400 people stared at her, some with pity, some with barely disguised glee. The wedding of the year had just become the scandal of the decade, and she was the punchline. Emily's hand started shaking so hard she almost dropped her bouquet. "Em!" Rachel's voice came from somewhere behind her, horrified. That snapped something. Emily turned and ran. She didn't care about the dress, the train tangling around her legs, the veil slipping from her hair. She just ran, her heels clattering on marble, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of these people. Behind her, the whispers grew louder, feeding on her humiliation like sharks on blood. She burst through the cathedral's side door into the late afternoon sun. The courtyard was empty, just stone benches and carefully trimmed hedges. Emily stumbled to a bench and collapsed, her breathing ragged, her chest so tight she thought she might pass out. He'd left her. At the altar. In front of everyone. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. 3 years. She'd given him 3 years of her life. She'd put up with his mother's cruelty, his friends' condescension, his casual dismissals of her work, her background, her everything. She'd convinced herself it was love, that he saw something in her worth keeping. But she'd been wrong. She'd always been wrong. Quite a performance in there. Emily's head snapped up. A man stood a few feet away, leaning against one of the courtyard pillars like he'd been there the whole time. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to cut through everything they looked at. She'd never seen him before. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice wrecked. "Someone who's been watching you for a while." He pushed off the pillar and walked toward her, his movements controlled, deliberate. "You deserve better than Daniel Whitmore." "You don't know me." "I know more than you think." He stopped a few feet away, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I know you've worked at Marco's Diner for 6 years. I know you put yourself through community college while supporting your sister. I know Daniel's family has been planning to humiliate you for months, and you walked into it anyway because you actually believed he loved you." Emily stared at him, ice spreading through her veins. "How do you—" "My name is Lorenzo DeLuca," he said, "and I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in whatever. Marry me instead." The words hit her like a slap. Emily blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me. Tonight. Right now." Lorenzo's expression didn't change. He wasn't joking. "I'll give you everything the Whitmores took from you. Wealth, power, protection. And I'll destroy the family that just humiliated you in front of 400 people." Emily laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "You're insane." "Possibly." He tilted his head. "But I'm also serious. You walk away from here broken and humiliated, and Daniel Whitmore goes on with his perfect life. His family wins. You lose. Or he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You take my hand, and we change the story. Why? Emily demanded. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Let's just say I have my reasons. Something flickered across his face, anger, old and deep. The Whitmores and their circle have gotten away with crushing people like us for too long. I'm offering you a chance to crush them back. People like us? Emily's laugh was bitter. You're wearing a suit that costs more than I make in 6 months. I wasn't always. Lorenzo's voice went cold. I know what it's like to be looked down on, to be told you don't belong, and I know what it's like to take everything from the people who said that. Emily stared at him. This was crazy. Absolutely insane. She didn't know this man. Marrying him would be... But then she thought about walking back into that cathedral, facing the whispers, the pity, the gleeful schadenfreude, going back to her tiny apartment alone, going back to the diner on Monday morning, serving coffee to people who'd been in that crowd today, living with the knowledge that Daniel had discarded her like trash, and she'd just taken it. What's the catch? She asked quietly. It's a business arrangement, Lorenzo said. Mutual benefit. You get protection and resources. I get... He paused. Let's say I get satisfaction, and maybe, if we're lucky, we both get revenge. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving tonight. He held out his hand. So what's it going to be, Emily Carter? Do you want to disappear and let them win? Or do you want to become someone they'll never dare dismiss again? She looked at his hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles, steady. She looked back at the cathedral, where her destroyed wedding reception was probably already underway, guests gossiping over champagne and canapes about poor Emily Carter, who thought she could marry above her station. Emily stood up. The wedding dress felt heavy, ridiculous now, a costume for a play that had ended badly. If I do this, she said, I want one thing clear. I'm not anyone's prop, not anymore. Lorenzo's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I wouldn't have it any other way. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and the moment her fingers touched his, something shifted. The air felt charged, dangerous. Lorenzo pulled her closer, and Emily realized with a start that she wasn't afraid. She should be. This man was a stranger offering an impossible deal, but all she felt was a strange, reckless clarity. I have a car waiting, Lorenzo said. We can be married within the hour. Then the real work begins. What real work? Making you untouchable. He started walking, still holding her hand, pulling her toward the courtyard side gate. And making sure Daniel Whitmore regrets ever looking down on you. They moved through the gate into a narrow alley where a black car waited, sleek and expensive. The driver opened the door without a word. Lorenzo gestured for her to get in. Emily hesitated for one last second. This was it. The point of no return. If she got in that car, her life would never be the same. She got in. Lorenzo slid in beside her, and the door closed with a solid thunk. The interior smelled like leather and something else, something darker. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Where are we going? She asked as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. Somewhere private. I have a judge who owes me a favor. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. We'll handle the paperwork, make it legal, and then we'll get you out of that dress and into something that makes a statement. A statement. You'll see. He glanced at her, and for the first time his expression softened slightly. You're going to be fine, Emily. Better than fine. But you need to trust me. I don't trust you at all, she said honestly. Smart. He pocketed his phone. Trust is earned. I'll earn it. But first we have a wedding to crash. Emily's stomach flipped. What? 2 weeks from now, Daniel's father is hosting a political fundraiser, 500 of the city's elite. Daniel will be there playing the dutiful son. Lorenzo's voice went hard. We're going to attend, as Mr. and Mrs. DeLuca, and we're going to remind everyone in that room exactly who you are now. They'll eat me alive. No, Lorenzo said quietly. They won't, because by then, you won't be the girl who got left at the altar. You'll be my wife, and no one touches what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down her spine. Emily looked out the window at the city passing by, the familiar streets that had always felt too big, too cold. Everything was changing. She was changing. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Really? You could have anyone. Why show up today? Why offer this?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, raw, honest. "Because I was you once, and no one offered me a way out. I had to claw my way up alone, and it nearly destroyed me. When I saw what the Whitmores were planning, when I saw you walking down that aisle like a lamb to slaughter, I decided I wasn't going to let it happen. Not again." "You knew they'd leave me at the altar?" "I had it on good authority." His jaw tightened. "Catherine Whitmore has been bragging about it for weeks. How her idiot son finally came to his senses. How she'd saved the family from an unfortunate alliance. She thought it was funny." Rage flared hot in Emily's chest. "And you didn't warn me? Would you have believed me?" Lorenzo met her eyes. "If a stranger had shown up and told you your fiancé planned to humiliate you publicly, would you have walked away?" Emily wanted to say yes, but she knew the truth. She would have dismissed it as jealousy, sabotage, anything but the truth, because she'd wanted so desperately to believe Daniel loved her. "No," she admitted. "Exactly. So I waited. And when the moment came, I made sure I was there to offer you something better." The car pulled up to a building Emily didn't recognize. Sleek, modern, all glass and steel. Lorenzo got out and extended his hand again. She took it, letting him help her from the car. Her dress snagged on the door, and she yanked it free with more force than necessary. "I hate this dress," she muttered. "We'll burn it later if you want," Lorenzo said. "But first, let's make you a bride again." They walked into the building, past a security desk that waved them through without question, and into an elevator that rose silently to the top floor. When the doors opened, they stepped into what looked like a private office, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. An older man waited there, gray-haired and distinguished, with kind eyes and a leather portfolio. "Lorenzo, and this must be Emily." "Judge Carrington," Lorenzo said. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "Always happy to help." The judge gestured to a small table where 2 chairs waited. "Shall we begin?" Emily's head spun. This was happening. This was actually happening. She sat. Lorenzo sat beside her. Judge Carrington opened the portfolio and pulled out papers, a pen, official-looking documents that made this real. "This is a marriage license," the judge explained gently. "You'll both need to sign. Emily, I need to confirm, you're entering this agreement of your own free will, no coercion?" Emily looked at Lorenzo. He met her gaze steadily, waiting. This was her choice. He wasn't forcing her. She could still walk away, but walk away to what? To nothing. To the wreckage Daniel had left behind. "Yes," she said. "I'm choosing this." Judge Carrington nodded and walked them through the paperwork. Emily signed her name, Emily Ann Carter, for the last time. Tomorrow, she'd be someone else. The ceremony itself was brief, almost anticlimactic. Judge Carrington spoke the traditional words, asked the traditional questions. Lorenzo's responses were calm, measured. Emily's voice shook, but she got through it. "By the power vested in me," the judge said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Lorenzo leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't what Emily expected. It was soft, careful, almost tentative, like he was giving her the space to pull away if she wanted. But she didn't. She kissed him back and felt something click into place. A door closing behind her, another opening ahead. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo's eyes were darker. "Mrs. DeLuca." The name sounded foreign, wrong, right. "Mr. DeLuca," she echoed. Judge Carrington gathered the papers, shook both their hands, and left with quiet efficiency. The door closed, and Emily was alone with her new husband. "Now what?" she asked. Lorenzo walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to glow in the dusk. "Now we prepare. 2 weeks isn't much time." "Time for what?" "To turn you into someone the Whitmores can't touch." He turned back to her. "You'll need new clothes, new connections, new everything. I'll provide all of it. But Emily," his voice went serious, This only works if you're willing to be ruthless. Can you do that? Emily thought about Daniel's face as he'd humiliated her, Catherine Whitmore's cold satisfaction, the 400 guests who'd watched her fall apart like it was entertainment. Yes, she said, I can be ruthless. Lorenzo smiled, and this time it was real, sharp, and dangerous. Good. Then let's begin. The first week felt like drowning in reverse, being pulled up from the depths so fast Emily couldn't catch her breath. Lorenzo's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in the financial district, all clean lines and windows that made the city look like something you could own. Emily stood in the master bedroom the morning after the wedding, staring at her reflection in a mirror that cost more than her old rent, and didn't recognize herself. The wedding dress was gone, burned, just like Lorenzo had promised, in the penthouse's private fireplace while she'd watched from the couch wrapped in a bathrobe that was softer than anything she'd ever touched. She'd expected to feel something when the flames consumed the ivory lace, grief, maybe, or regret. Instead, she'd felt nothing, just hollow. You need to eat something, Lorenzo said from the doorway. Emily turned. He was already dressed, charcoal suit perfectly tailored, dark hair still damp from the shower. He looked like he belonged in a place like this. She felt like an imposter wearing borrowed clothes. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday morning. He walked into the room carrying a tray with coffee, toast, fruit. We have a busy day. You need fuel. Stop telling me what I need. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but Lorenzo didn't flinch. He just set the tray on the bedside table and studied her with that unsettling intensity. You're angry, he said. No shit. Good. Anger is useful, but you need to direct it properly. He poured coffee into a cup, handed it to her. Drink, then get dressed. We're meeting with Vanessa at 10. Who's Vanessa? Your new stylist. She's going to help transform you into someone the Whitmores won't recognize. Emily took the coffee because her hands needed something to hold. The cup was warm, grounding. I don't want to be someone else. You're not becoming someone else, Lorenzo said quietly. You're becoming who you were meant to be before Daniel Whitmore convinced you to make yourself smaller. The words hit harder than they should have. Emily sank onto the edge of the bed, still holding the coffee. You don't know what he convinced me of. I know you stopped applying to four-year colleges after you met him. I know you turned down a promotion at the diner because Daniel said it would make you too busy for him. I know you let his mother criticize everything about you without pushing back because you thought being agreeable would make them accept you. Lorenzo crouched down so they were eye level. I know you spent 3 years erasing yourself for someone who was always planning to throw you away. Emily's throat tightened. How do you know all this? I make it my business to know things. He stood, walked to the closet, and pulled out a simple black dress. Wear this today. Vanessa will bring options, but this will work for now. You bought me clothes? I bought you everything. Clothes, shoes, jewelry, whatever you need. He laid the dress on the bed. It's part of the arrangement. You're my wife now. You need to look the part. The word wife still sounded wrong. Emily set down the coffee and picked up the dress. It was beautiful, understated but expensive, the kind of thing Catherine Whitmore would wear, the kind of thing Emily had never been able to afford. What if I can't do this? She asked quietly. Lorenzo paused at the door. Can't do what? All of it. The clothes, the act, the... She gestured helplessly at the penthouse, at him, at everything. What if I screw this up and waste your time? You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He met her eyes. You survived 3 years with Daniel Whitmore. You survived his mother's cruelty. You survived yesterday. You're stronger than you think, Emily. You just need to remember it. He left before she could respond. Vanessa arrived at 10 sharp, a whirlwind of energy and designer heels and perfectly styled auburn hair. She swept into the penthouse with 2 assistants carrying garment bags and makeup cases, took one look at Emily, and smiled. Oh, we're going to have fun with you, Vanessa said. Emily sat stiffly on the couch while Vanessa circled her like a predator sizing up prey. I don't know what Lorenzo told you, but I'm not looking for a makeover. Good, because that's not what we're doing. Vanessa gestured to her assistants, who began unpacking bags. Makeovers are about hiding who you are. We're doing the opposite. We're going to strip away all the bullshit and show people exactly who Emily DeLuca is. I don't know who that is yet. Then let's find out. Vanessa pulled out a sleek navy pantsuit, held it up against Emily's frame. Tell me something. When you were with Daniel, what did you wear to his events? Emily thought back to those endless fundraisers and galas. Whatever his mother approved, pastels mostly, soft colors, nothing too attention-grabbing. Of course, Vanessa's expression went sharp. She wanted you invisible, forgettable. Well, those days are over. From now on, when you walk into a room, people notice. Over the next 4 hours, Emily tried on what felt like 100 outfits. Dresses, suits, casual wear, evening gowns. Vanessa was ruthless, discarding anything that didn't work with a curt no and moving on. But when something fit right, her face would light up. That, Vanessa said when Emily emerged in a charcoal dress with a fitted bodice and a skirt that skimmed her knees, that's the one for the fundraiser. Emily looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple but devastating, the kind of thing that made you look twice. It had structure, power. She looked older, sharper, dangerous. It's too much, Emily said. It's perfect. Vanessa came up behind her, adjusting the shoulders. You're not trying to blend in anymore. You're making a statement. And that statement is, I'm here, I'm powerful, and you can't touch me. Emily stared at her reflection. The woman looking back wasn't the waitress from Marco's diner. She wasn't the humiliated bride from yesterday. She was someone new, someone harder. Okay, Emily said. We'll take it. Vanessa grinned. That's my girl. Now, let's talk about hair. By the time Vanessa and her team left, it was late afternoon. Emily's closet was full of clothes she'd never have chosen herself, her bathroom stocked with products she didn't know how to use. She felt exhausted, overwhelmed, like she'd just run a marathon. Lorenzo found her sitting on the bedroom floor, surrounded by shoeboxes. Rough day? He asked. Your stylist is terrifying. Vanessa's the best. If she scared you, good. That means she's taking this seriously. He sat down beside her, which surprised Emily. Lorenzo always seemed too controlled to do something as casual as sit on the floor. Did she find something for the fundraiser? Yeah, a dress that cost more than my car. You don't have a car anymore. I had it donated. Emily's head snapped up. You what? It was 15 years old and barely running. I replaced it. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of a sleek silver sedan. This is parked in the garage downstairs. It's registered in your name. Emily stared at the phone. The car was beautiful, new, completely impractical for someone like her. Lorenzo, I can't accept this. You already did. The paperwork's done. That's not... You can't just... She struggled for words. You can't buy me things without asking. Why not? You're my wife. I'm providing for you. I'm not a doll you get to dress up, Emily snapped. I'm a person. I get a say. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then he pocketed his phone. You're right. I should have asked. I'm not used to say... He stopped, chose his words carefully. I'm used to making decisions alone. I'll try to do better. The admission surprised her. Emily had expected him to argue, to pull rank, to remind her this was a business arrangement. Instead, he was apologizing. Thank you, she said quietly. They sat in silence for a while, surrounded by shoeboxes and tissue paper. Outside, the city was turning gold with sunset. Emily could see for miles from up here, all the way to the harbor. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why do you hate the Whitmores so much? Lorenzo's expression went cold. That's a long story. We have time. He looked at her, weighing something. Then he stood, walked to the window and stared out at the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, rougher, like he was pulling up something buried deep. 20 years ago, my father owned a small construction company. Nothing fancy, just enough to support our family. Richard Whitmore was building his political career and he needed a new campaign office. He hired my father for the job. Lorenzo's hands curled into fists. The work was solid. My father did everything right. But when it came time to pay, Whitmore refused. Said the work was substandard, threatened to sue if my father pushed back. We didn't have money for lawyers. We couldn't fight him. Emily's chest tightened. What happened? My father lost everything. The business folded. He started drinking. By the time I was 16, he was gone. Heart attack, but really it was shame that killed him. And Richard Whitmore never faced a single consequence. Lorenzo turned to face her. I built my fortune specifically so people like the Whitmores couldn't crush people like my father ever again. And when I found out Daniel was planning to humiliate you at the altar, I saw an opportunity to get revenge, to get justice. His voice went hard. They destroy people for fun, Emily. They did it to my family. They were about to do it to you. I'm making sure they pay. Emily stood, walked over to him. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the old anger burning in his eyes. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. I'm sorry about your father, she said. Don't be sorry. Help me make them regret it. She met his gaze. I will. The second week moved faster. Lorenzo brought in tutors, a woman named Patricia who taught Emily how to navigate high society conversations without revealing she was terrified, a man named Marcus who walked her through the financial structures of old money families so she'd understand the battlefield. Emily absorbed it all like her life depended on it, because maybe it did. The hardest part was learning to be still. Emily was used to moving constantly, clearing tables, pouring coffee, staying busy so she didn't have to think. But in Lorenzo's world, stillness was power. You didn't fidget, you didn't rush, you took up space like you owned it. Stop apologizing for existing, Patricia said during one of their sessions. When you walk into a room, you belong there. Act like it. What if I don't believe that? Fake it until you do. Patricia smiled. Confidence is a performance. The more you perform it, the more real it becomes. Emily practiced in front of mirrors, walking with her shoulders back, her chin up, her expression neutral. She practiced conversations, learning when to speak and when to let silence do the work. She practiced being someone who didn't need approval. It felt like learning a new language. Lorenzo was always there, watching, correcting, pushing. Sometimes his intensity grated on her. He was demanding, impatient, unwilling to accept anything less than perfect. But other times, late at night when they'd both given up on sleep and ended up in the living room with wine and exhaustion, he was different, quieter, almost human. Tell me about the diner, he said one night. Emily looked up from her glass. Why? I want to know what your life was like before. She thought about Marco's, the cracked vinyl booths, and the smell of burnt coffee and grease. It was loud, chaotic. I was good at it, though, remembering orders, keeping people happy. It made me feel useful. You miss it. It wasn't a question. Emily considered lying, but what was the point? Yeah, sometimes. At least there I knew who I was. Lorenzo set down his glass. You know who you are now. Do I? You're the woman who chose to fight instead of disappear. That's not nothing, Emily. She wanted to believe him. Some days she almost did. The night before the fundraiser, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her bed, in a room Lorenzo had given her without question because apparently they weren't expected to share a bedroom in this arrangement, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd face Daniel, Catherine, Senator Whitmore, everyone who'd watched her fall apart. Terror and rage fought for space in her chest. Around 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and wandered into the kitchen. Lorenzo was already there, sitting at the counter with a laptop and a glass of whiskey. Can't sleep? He asked, without looking up. No. Nervous about tomorrow? Emily poured herself water, leaned against the counter. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Lorenzo closed the laptop. But don't let it control you. You walk in there tomorrow as my wife. That makes you untouchable. You keep saying that, but what does it actually mean? It means I have leverage on every family in that room. Financial, political, personal. They all owe me something, or they're afraid of what I know. When you're standing next to me, that protection extends to you. He met her eyes. No one will dare humiliate you, not if they want to stay in my good graces. And if someone does anyway? Lorenzo's smile was cold. Then I'll destroy them. The casual brutality of it should have scared her. Instead, Emily felt something close to relief. For 3 years, she'd been on her own, navigating Daniel's world without backup or protection. Now, she had both. What happens after tomorrow? She asked. What do you mean? After we humiliate the Whitmores. After the revenge is done. What happens to us? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. You haven't thought, Emily laughed, incredulous. You orchestrated this entire thing, but you don't have an exit strategy? The exit strategy is you walk away with enough money and connections to build whatever life you want. Free and clear. And you? I go back to my work. Just like that. Just like that. Emily studied him. He looked tired, she realized. Not physically, but deeper. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and forgotten how to put it down. That sounds lonely, she said. Lorenzo picked up his glass. I'm used to it. They sat in silence after that. Two people bound by a contract and shared anger, trying to figure out what came next. Eventually, Emily went back to bed. She still didn't sleep, but the terror had dulled to something manageable. Morning came too fast. Emily stood in front of her closet, staring at the charcoal dress Vanessa had chosen. It hung there like a challenge. She put it on. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves in ways that felt powerful instead of vulnerable. She did her makeup the way Vanessa had taught her. Subtle but striking, emphasizing her eyes. She pulled her hair back into a sleek twist that made her look older, sharper. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who could walk into that fundraiser and survive. Lorenzo was waiting in the living room, impeccable, in a black tuxedo. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or appreciation. You look... Don't, Emily interrupted. If you say I look beautiful, I'll lose my nerve. His mouth quirked. I was going to say you look dangerous. Better. He offered his arm. Ready? Emily took a breath. Somewhere across the city, Daniel Whitmore was getting ready for his father's fundraiser, probably laughing with his friends about the wedding disaster, secure in the knowledge that Emily Carter had been erased from his life without consequence. He had no idea what was coming. Yeah, Emily said, taking Lorenzo's arm. Let's go. The car ride was silent, tension coiling tighter with every mile. Emily watched the city pass by, her hands folded carefully in her lap to keep them from shaking. Lorenzo sat beside her, still and controlled, but she could feel the energy radiating off him. He was ready for this. He'd been ready for 20 years. The fundraiser was being held at the Ashford Estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city that old money families rented for events like this. As they pulled up the circular drive, Emily saw valets in crisp uniforms, guests in evening wear climbing the steps, light spilling from every window. Remember, Lorenzo said as their car stopped, you belong here. Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking otherwise. The valet opened Emily's door. She stepped out, and the night air hit her like a slap. She could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Somewhere in that building, Daniel was waiting. Lorenzo came around the car and offered his arm again. Emily took it, let him guide her up the steps. Her heels clicked on marble. People turned to look. She kept her chin up, her expression neutral, just like Patricia had taught her. They walked through the entrance into a ballroom that looked like something from another century. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, tables draped in white linen. 500 people milled around in clusters, the city's elite playing their endless games of influence and power. And there, near the center of the room, stood Daniel Whitmore. He was talking to a blonde woman Emily didn't recognize, laughing at something she'd said. He looked exactly the same. Perfect hair, perfect suit, perfect smile. Like the wedding had never happened. Like Emily had never existed. Catherine Whitmore stood nearby, holding court with a group of older women. Senator Whitmore was across the room, deep in conversation with someone Emily assumed was important based on the number of people hovering nearby. Emily's hand started to shake. Lorenzo felt it. His grip on her arm tightened slightly. Breathe. He's right there. I know. And in about 30 seconds, he's going to see you. And his world is going to fall apart. Emily forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. Then Lorenzo stepped forward, pulling her with him, and the crowd began to part. People noticed them. Of course they did. Lorenzo DeLuca was impossible to ignore, and Emily was a stranger on his arm. Whispers started, spreading like fire. She caught fragments. Who is that? Lorenzo brought someone. Is that... Daniel looked up. Their eyes met. Emily watched his face go white. His mouth opened, closed. The The blonde woman kept talking, oblivious, but Daniel wasn't listening. He was staring at Emily like she was a ghost. Catherine Whitmore noticed next. Her expression went from confusion to shock to rage in the space of a heartbeat. Lorenzo kept walking, guiding Emily deeper into the ballroom with easy confidence. They stopped near the center of the room, close enough to Daniel that there was no mistaking the confrontation. "Daniel," Lorenzo said smoothly, "good to see you." Daniel couldn't seem to form words. He just stared at Emily. "Allow me to introduce my wife," Lorenzo continued, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "Emily DeLuca, though I believe you two have met." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Catherine Whitmore pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. "What is this? What is she doing here?" "She's here as my guest," Lorenzo said. "Well, more than a guest. As I mentioned, she's my wife. We were married last Saturday. Quite a lovely ceremony, actually." "That's impossible," Daniel finally managed. You left her at the altar," Lorenzo said calmly. "I picked up where you left off. I have to thank you, actually. If you hadn't been so spectacularly cruel, I never would have met her." Emily stood frozen, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. This was it, the moment everything changed. Catherine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You little opportunist! You couldn't get a Whitmore, so you settled for—" "Careful," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice going cold. "You're talking about my wife. I don't tolerate disrespect." "Disrespect?" Catherine laughed harshly. "She's a waitress, a nobody, and you're, what, trying to make some point by parading her around?" "The point," Lorenzo said, "is that Emily is no longer the woman you spent 3 years belittling. She's under my protection now, which means she's untouchable. And speaking of protection," he pulled a folder from his jacket pocket, handed it to Daniel. "I thought you might want to see this." Daniel opened the folder with shaking hands. Emily couldn't see what was inside, but she watched the color drain from his face. "What is this?" Daniel whispered. "Evidence of your family's financial misconduct. Embezzled campaign funds, tax evasion, shell corporations designed to hide assets. I've had investigators digging for months. It's all there." Catherine grabbed the folder, scanned the contents. Her hands started shaking. "You can't— This is legal?" "Yes. Damaging? Absolutely." Lorenzo's voice was surgical. "I have copies with 3 different media outlets. They publish tomorrow unless I make a phone call tonight telling them to stand down." Senator Whitmore had noticed the commotion. He pushed through the crowd, his expression thunderous. "What the hell is going on here?" "Your son humiliated my wife," Lorenzo said simply. "I'm returning the favor." The senator looked at Emily, recognition dawning slowly. "You're the girl from the wedding." "I'm Emily DeLuca," she said, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. "And I'm not a girl." But Whitmore's face went red. "This is blackmail. This is justice." Lorenzo took the folder back, tucked it away. "You've built your career crushing people who couldn't fight back. My father, Emily, dozens of others. That ends tonight." The entire ballroom was watching now, 500 people witnessing the most powerful family in the city getting torn apart by a man they'd underestimated. Emily could see phones out, people filming. This would be everywhere by morning. "What do you want?" Whitmore demanded. "Public acknowledgement of your crimes. Resignation from office. Full restitution to everyone you've stolen from." Lorenzo's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like a blade. "And an apology to Emily for what your family put her through." "Go to hell," Catherine spat. "Your choice." Lorenzo pulled out his phone. "I make one call, and those files go live. Your reputation, your career, your family name, gone. Or you do what I'm asking, and maybe you walk away with something left." Daniel looked between his parents, his face ashen. "Dad!" "Shut up," Whitmore snapped. He looked at Lorenzo with pure hatred. "You're bluffing." "Try me." The standoff stretched. Emily could barely breathe. Everyone was waiting, watching. This was the moment. Either the Whitmores backed down, or everything Lorenzo had built collapsed. Senator Whitmore's jaw worked. Then, slowly, he turned to Emily. "I apologize," he said, the words forced through gritted teeth, "for my family's treatment of you. It wasn't genuine. It wasn't heartfelt. But it was public. and it was humiliating, and Emily felt something crack open in her chest. "Accepted," she said coolly. Lorenzo smiled. "Good. As for the rest, you have 48 hours to make your announcement. I'll be watching." He took Emily's arm and turned, walking back through the crowd with calm, unhurried confidence. People scrambled out of their way. Emily kept her head high, her expression neutral, even though inside she was screaming. They made it to the car, the door closed, and then Emily started shaking so hard she couldn't stop. "You did it," Lorenzo said quietly. "You faced them, and you won." Emily couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face that she couldn't control. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief. Triumph. Release. Lorenzo didn't try to stop her crying. He just sat beside her while the driver pulled away from the Ashford estate, leaving the wreckage behind. And for the first time since Daniel had destroyed her at the altar, Emily felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. The penthouse felt different when they got back. Emily kicked off her heels the moment she walked through the door, leaving them in the middle of the entryway like abandoned evidence. Her feet ached. Her face hurt from holding that neutral expression for so long. But underneath the exhaustion, something was buzzing, electric and restless. Lorenzo loosened his bow tie, poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass and she took it, drank half in one swallow. The burn felt good, real. "How do you feel?" he asked. Emily laughed, a little wild. "I don't know, like I just jumped off a bridge maybe, or pushed someone off one." "Both, probably." Lorenzo sat on the couch, watching her pace. "You did well tonight." "I didn't do anything. You did all the talking." "You showed up. That was the hard part." Emily stopped pacing, looked at him. He'd taken off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost relaxed. "Did you see Daniel's face?" she asked. "I did." "He looked like he was going to throw up." "Good." Emily drained the rest of her whiskey, set the glass down harder than she meant to. "I wanted to say something. When Catherine called me a nobody, I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her, but I just stood there." "You didn't need to say anything. Your presence said enough." "But that's not—" Emily pressed her hands to her face, trying to organize the chaos in her head. "I spent 3 years letting that woman make me feel small. Tonight was supposed to be my chance to fight back, and I still couldn't do it." Lorenzo stood, walked over to her. "You think fighting back means screaming? Making a scene? That's what they expect from someone like you. Someone they can dismiss as emotional, unstable, beneath them." He pulled her hands away from her face, made her look at him. "But you didn't give them that. You walked in there on my arm, calm and controlled, and watched their world fall apart. That's power, Emily. Real power." She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. He was right. The look on Catherine's face when she'd realized she couldn't touch Emily anymore. That had been worth more than any speech. "Okay," Emily said quietly. "Okay. You're right. I'm still learning how to do this." Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. "We both are." The admission surprised her. Emily had assumed Lorenzo had everything figured out, that this whole revenge scheme was just another Tuesday for him. But standing here in his living room with his tie undone and exhaustion in his eyes, he looked human, uncertain even. "What happens now?" she asked. "Whitmore has 48 hours to make his announcement. If he doesn't, the files go public anyway. And if he does? Then he resigns in disgrace, and his family spends the next decade trying to recover their reputation. Either way, they're finished." Emily walked to the windows, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, the Whitmores were probably having an emergency meeting, trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage. She should feel triumphant, victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. "I keep thinking about my sister," she said. Lorenzo came to stand beside her. "Rachel?" "Yeah, she called me 6 times yesterday. I haven't answered." Emily's reflection stared back at her from the glass. "She probably thinks I've lost my mind. Running off with some stranger, getting married. She has no idea what's going on." "Do you want to tell her?" "I don't know what to say." "Hey, Rach, I married a man I met 5 minutes after Daniel humiliated me, and now we're destroying his family together. That sounds insane. It is insane, Lorenzo agreed. But it's also working. Emily laughed despite herself. Is that supposed to be comforting? Not particularly. They stood there in silence, side by side, watching the city lights. Emily could see their reflections overlapping in the glass, her in the charcoal dress, him in his rumpled tuxedo. They looked like they belonged together, like this was real instead of an arrangement built on mutual anger and convenience. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Always. Why haven't you gotten married before? I mean, really married, not this. She gestured between them. Arrangement. You're rich, successful, clearly not hideous. Why stay alone? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. After my father died, I spent years building my fortune, making myself into someone the Whitmores couldn't ignore or dismiss. It took everything I had, time, energy, focus. There wasn't room for anything else. And now? Now I'm starting to wonder if I forgot how to make room. The honesty in his voice caught Emily off guard. She turned to look at him properly and found him already watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That's depressing, she said. Little bit. You know what's weird? Before yesterday, I thought I had everything figured out. Marry Daniel, become a Whitmore, finally have the stability I'd been chasing my whole life. But standing here now, I realize I was just trying to fit into someone else's life. I never asked what I actually wanted. What do you want? Lorenzo asked. Emily considered the question. A week ago, the answer would have been simple: safety, security, someone to love who loved her back. But now? Everything felt different, bigger, more complicated. I want to stop being afraid, she said finally, of being judged, of not being good enough, of ending up alone. I want to walk into a room and not immediately start calculating how to make people like me. I want... She stopped, frustrated. I don't know. I want to matter. You do matter. To who? You barely know me. I know enough. Lorenzo turned to face her fully. I know you're stronger than Daniel Whitmore ever deserved. I know you're smart enough to see through people's bullshit, including mine. I know you took the biggest risk of your life last week because staying small felt worse than jumping into the unknown. That matters, Emily. You matter. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. Emily felt her eyes sting, and she blinked hard, refusing to cry again. She'd cried enough for one night. You can't say things like that, she managed. Why not? Because this is temporary. We both know that. In a few months, this arrangement ends and we go our separate ways. Getting attached is a bad idea. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Right, of course. The moment stretched, awkward and charged. Emily wanted to take back what she'd said, but it was true. Wasn't it? This was business, mutual benefit, nothing more. I should get some sleep, she said, stepping back. Big day tomorrow, probably. Media coverage, fallout, whatever comes next. Yeah, good idea. Emily walked toward her bedroom, but stopped at the door. Lorenzo? Yeah? Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Get some rest. Emily closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart hammering. What was she doing? This whole situation was already complicated enough without adding feelings to the mix. Lorenzo was right. She mattered to this plan because she was useful, because she was the perfect weapon against the Whitmores. That was it. She changed into pajamas, washed off her makeup, climbed into bed. But sleep didn't come. Her mind kept replaying the fundraiser, Daniel's shocked face, Catherine's rage, the way Lorenzo had stood beside her like a shield, the way he'd looked at her in the reflection just now, like she was something worth keeping instead of something temporary. Around 3 a.m, Emily gave up and grabbed her phone. 6 missed calls from Rachel. 12 texts. The most recent one read, I'm freaking out. Please just tell me you're okay. Emily stared at the screen. Then she typed, I'm okay. I'm sorry I disappeared. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? The response came back almost immediately. Yes. Marco's at 10. Emily hesitated. Marco's diner. Her old life. Walking in there as Emily DeLuca instead of Emily Carter felt wrong somehow, like wearing a costume to a place that had always seen her real. But Rachel deserved answers. Okay, Emily typed back. See you at 10. She set down the phone and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was going to be a disaster. Morning came with headlines. Emily sat at the kitchen counter with her coffee, scrolling through her phone while Lorenzo made calls in his office. The fundraiser had made every news site, every gossip column, every social media platform. Photos of her and Lorenzo were everywhere, walking into the Ashford estate, confronting the Whitmores, leaving while everyone watched. Mystery woman marries Lorenzo DeLuca days after wedding disaster, one headline screamed. Another read, Whitmore family in crisis after public confrontation. The photos were brutal. Emily barely recognized herself, poised, cold, untouchable. Mrs. Emily DeLuca. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You really thought you could embarrass us without consequences? Emily's stomach dropped. She showed Lorenzo when he emerged from his office. He read it, his expression darkening. Catherine, how did she get my number? Money buys access. Lorenzo deleted the message, blocked the number. She's desperate. Ignore it. What if she doesn't stop? Then I make her stop. Lorenzo poured himself coffee. Don't let her get in your head. That's what she wants. Emily set down her phone, tried to steady her nerves. I'm meeting Rachel this morning at Marco's. Lorenzo looked up sharply. Are you sure that's a good idea? She's my sister. I owe her an explanation. The press is going to be all over this. The moment someone recognizes you, I know, but I'm doing it anyway. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have a driver take you. And security, just in case. Security? That's excessive. Emily, you humiliated one of the most powerful families in the city last night. Excessive is the bare minimum right now. He wasn't wrong. Emily finished her coffee, got dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, the first time she'd worn normal clothes since the wedding. Looking at herself in the mirror, she almost looked like her old self. Almost. The driver dropped her off a block from Marco's to avoid attention. A man in a dark suit, Lorenzo's security, apparently, followed at a discreet distance. Emily walked the familiar route, past the bodega that sold day-old bread, past the dry cleaner that still had her old work shirts, past the bus stop where she'd waited 1,000 mornings. Marco's hadn't changed. Same neon sign, same cracked sidewalk, same greasy windows. Emily pushed through the door and was hit with the smell of burnt coffee and bacon. It felt like coming home and visiting a crime scene at the same time. Rachel was already there, sitting in a back booth. When she saw Emily, she stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her water. Oh my God, Rachel breathed. Oh my God, you're actually alive. Emily slid into the booth across from her. Hi, Rach. Hi. Hi. You disappear for a week after the worst wedding disaster in history, and all you have to say is hi. I know. I'm sorry. It's been complicated. Complicated? Rachel's voice rose. Em, I saw the photos. You married someone else. Some billionaire I've never heard of. What the hell happened? Emily glanced around. A few people were staring, recognition dawning on their faces. This was a mistake. She should have picked somewhere private. Can you keep your voice down? No, I can't keep my voice down. You owe me an explanation. Fair enough. Emily took a breath and tried to figure out where to start. After Daniel left me at the altar, I ran. And Lorenzo found me. He offered me a way out, a way to fight back. So I took it. By marrying him. It's an arrangement, business. He gets leverage against the Whitmores. I get protection and resources. Rachel stared at her like she'd grown a second head. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. I know. And you just, what, agreed without thinking about it? I did think about it for about 30 seconds. Then I decided anything was better than going back to that church and facing those people alone. Rachel sat back, processing. Is this guy treating you okay? You're safe? I'm safe. Lorenzo is, Emily struggled for words. He's intense, demanding, but he's not cruel. And he's kept every promise he's made. Promises like destroying the Whitmores. You saw the news? Everyone saw the news, Em. It's everywhere. Daniel's dad is holding a press conference this afternoon. Emily's pulse jumped. Already? Apparently Lorenzo's evidence was pretty damning. They're trying to get ahead of it. Rachel leaned forward. Is any of this actually making you happy? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you traded one nightmare for another. The question hit harder than it should have. Was she happy? Emily didn't know. She felt alive, powerful, dangerous, but happy. That seemed like a word from a different language. I don't know, Emily admitted, but I'm not drowning anymore. That counts for something. Rachel's expression softened. I just want you to be okay. I am, or I will be. I just need you to trust me on this. I want to, but this whole thing sounds like something out of a movie. Mysterious billionaire, revenge scheme, arranged marriage. It's not real life. It's my real life now. They sat in silence while a waitress refilled their coffee. Emily recognized her. Marie, who'd worked the morning shift for years. Marie's eyes went wide when she saw Emily. Oh, honey, Marie said quietly. We heard what happened at your wedding. Are you doing all right? Emily forced a smile. I'm fine, Marie, thanks. Well, if you need anything... Marie glanced at Rachel, lowered her voice even more. We all thought that Whitmore boy was a jerk anyway. You're better off. She walked away before Emily could respond. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Seems like everyone's team Emily now. They weren't when I was crying in the bathroom after Daniel's mother told me I'd never be good enough for her son. Fair point. Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Lorenzo. Whitmore's press conference is in 20 minutes. Thought you'd want to know. She showed Rachel the message. Are you going to watch? Rachel asked. Yeah, I have to. They paid and left, ignoring the stares from other customers. Outside, Lorenzo's security guy fell into step behind them. Rachel noticed. You have a bodyguard now? Apparently. This is so weird. They walked back to Rachel's apartment, a tiny studio 3 blocks from Marco's that Rachel shared with her girlfriend. Emily sat on the threadbare couch while Rachel pulled up a news stream on her laptop. Senator Richard Whitmore appeared on screen, standing behind a podium with his wife and son flanking him. He looked 20 years older than he had at the fundraiser, his face drawn and pale. Thank you all for coming, Whitmore began. I'm here today to address recent allegations regarding my conduct in both public and private business matters. Emily leaned forward, her heart hammering. After careful consideration and consultation with my family, I've decided to resign from my position in the Senate, effective immediately. Rachel gasped. Emily couldn't breathe. Whitmore continued, his voice tight. Additionally, I want to publicly acknowledge mistakes made in my financial dealings over the past 2 decades. I take full responsibility for these errors in judgment, and I'm committed to making amends to those affected. Holy shit, Rachel whispered. He actually did it. Emily watched Daniel standing behind his father, staring at the ground like he wished it would swallow him. Catherine looked like she'd been carved from stone, her expression frozen in barely controlled rage. I also want to extend my deepest apologies to Emily Carter, now Emily DeLuca, for my family's treatment of her. She deserved better, and I regret the pain we caused. The camera flashes went crazy. Reporters shouted questions. Whitmore stepped back from the podium, and his lawyer took over with damage control language about investigations and cooperation. Rachel muted the stream. This is actually happening. Emily felt numb. She'd watched Lorenzo plan this, had stood beside him last night as he delivered the ultimatum, but seeing it actually unfold, watching the most powerful family she'd ever known crumble on live television, felt surreal. Her phone rang. Lorenzo. Did you watch? He asked. Yeah. How do you feel? Emily looked at Rachel, who was staring at her with concern and awe in equal measure. I don't know yet. That's fair. Come home when you're ready. We need to talk about next steps. Next steps? The Whitmores are destroyed, but that doesn't mean they're harmless. We need to be smart about what comes next. Right. Because this wasn't over. It was never going to be over. Not really. Emily had just made permanent enemies of people who'd spent their entire lives wielding power. I'll be back in an hour, she said. She hung up. Rachel was watching her carefully. You called it home, Rachel said. What? The penthouse. You said you'd go home, not go back or return to Lorenzo's place. Home. Emily opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Rachel was right. I should go, Emily said, standing. Rachel stood too, pulled her into a tight hug. Be careful, okay? I know you think you've got this handled, but these people, they're dangerous. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just declared war on the entire upper class. Emily pulled back, met her sister's eyes. Good. They've had it coming for a long time. The drive back to the penthouse felt longer than it should have. Emily stared out the window, watching the city change from her old neighborhood to Lorenzo's world of steel and glass. Two different planets, and she was caught between them. Lorenzo was waiting when she got back, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. He gestured for her to wait while he finished the call. No, the announcement stands. If they try to walk it back, we release everything. A pause. Good. Keep me updated. He hung up, turned to face her. How's your sister? Terrified for me, convinced I've lost my mind. Have you? Emily thought about it. Maybe, but I think I lost it a long time ago, and I'm only just now noticing. Lorenzo almost smiled. Fair assessment. We need to talk about security. I already have security. The guy you sent is very subtle, by the way, really blends into the background. I'm serious, Emily. The Whitmores are going to lash out. Catherine especially. She's the type to make this personal. She already texted me this morning. Lorenzo's expression darkened. What did she say? Something about consequences. You deleted it. There's going to be more. Phone calls, maybe people showing up. They're going to try to intimidate you, make you back down. I'm not backing down. I know, that's why we need to be prepared. Lorenzo pulled out his tablet, showed her a security plan, routes, protocols, people to avoid. I've hired a full team. They'll be discreet, but they'll be close. No arguments. Emily wanted to fight him on it, to insist she could handle herself. But the truth was, she had no idea what the Whitmores were capable of when cornered, and Lorenzo did. Okay, she said, but I'm not giving up my entire life. I still want to see Rachel, go places, exist outside this building. I'm not asking you to hide, just to be smart. They spent the next hour going over details, safe routes, emergency contacts, protocols for different scenarios. It felt excessive and necessary at the same time. By the time they finished, Emily's head was spinning. I need air, she said. Lorenzo checked his watch. There's a private garden on the roof. It's secure. Of course there is. They took the elevator up, emerged onto a rooftop garden that Emily hadn't even known existed. It was beautiful, carefully maintained plants, stone pathways, a view of the entire city. Emily walked to the edge, looked out at the sprawl of buildings and streets. My father used to bring me up here when I was a kid, Lorenzo said, coming to stand beside her. Before he lost everything, he'd point out buildings and tell me stories about the people who owned them. He made it sound like a fairy tale. Work hard enough, and you could have anything. But he was wrong. Not wrong, just incomplete. Hard work isn't enough when the system is rigged against you. Lorenzo's voice went hard. The Whitmores and families like them. They don't play fair. They never have. So when you finally get powerful enough to challenge them, you have to be willing to fight dirty. Is that what we're doing? Fighting dirty? We're fighting smart. There's a difference. Emily turned to look at him. Do you ever feel guilty about it? About destroying them? Lorenzo met her eyes. No. Do you? She thought about Daniel's face at the fundraiser, pale and shocked. About Catherine's rage. About Senator Whitmore's resignation speech. She should feel something, guilt, pity, vindication, but all she felt was tired. No, she said finally. I don't. Good, because this is just the beginning. The beginning? I thought we were done. The Whitmores are finished, but there are others like them, families who built their fortunes on crushing people who couldn't fight back. I've been compiling files for years. Emily stared at him. You want to keep doing this? Destroying people? I want to balance the scales, and I want your help doing it. The proposition hung in the air between them. Emily knew she should say no. This was supposed to be temporary, get revenge, walk away clean. But standing here on the roof with the city spread out below them, she felt something shift inside her. She'd spent her entire life trying to fit in, to be accepted, to make herself small enough that people like the Whitmores would tolerate her presence. But that version of Emily was gone. She She'd burned with the wedding dress. The woman standing here now was someone different, someone who'd looked power in the face and refused to blink. Someone who mattered. What would that look like? Emily asked. Lorenzo's expression shifted, surprise, maybe, or hope. A partnership. Real, not just an arrangement. You'd have equal say in targets, methods, everything. Why me? Because you understand what it's like to be powerless, and because you're not afraid anymore. Emily looked back at the city. Somewhere down there, the Whitmores were licking their wounds, planning their next move. Other families were watching, calculating whether Lorenzo DeLuca was a threat or an opportunity. And here she was, being offered a chance to reshape everything. I want one condition, Emily said. Name it. We help people. Not just destroy the ones who hurt us, but actually help the ones getting crushed. My father, your father, everyone who gets forgotten, we give them a way out. Lorenzo considered this, then nodded. Deal. He held out his hand. Emily took it and felt the same electric charge she'd felt the night they'd gotten married. This was real, dangerous and complicated and completely insane, but real. Partners, Lorenzo said. Partners, Emily agreed. They shook on it, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. The storm broke 3 days later, but not the way Emily expected. She was in Lorenzo's office going through files on the Morrison family, old money real estate developers with a history of displacing low-income tenants, when Marcus, Lorenzo's head of security, burst through the door without knocking. We have a problem, Marcus said. Lorenzo looked up from his laptop. What kind of problem? Catherine Whitmore just showed up in the lobby. She's demanding to see Emily. Emily's stomach dropped. How did she get past security? She didn't come alone. She brought reporters, cameras, the whole circus. Says she won't leave until you talk to her. Lorenzo was already on his feet. Get her out of here. We can't. She's on public property. The moment we touch her, she'll claim assault and will be on every news site by dinner. So call the police. She knows we won't. It would look like we're hiding something. Marcus glanced at Emily. She's playing this smart, making it a spectacle. Emily stood, her mind racing. Catherine wanted a confrontation, a public scene where she could paint herself as the victim and Emily as the opportunist who destroyed her family. And if Emily refused to come down, Catherine would spin that too, claim Emily was hiding, afraid, guilty. I'll go, Emily said. Absolutely not. Lorenzo's voice was sharp. That's exactly what she wants. I know, but if I don't face her, she controls the narrative. At least if I go down there, I get to tell my side. Emily. I'm not the same person she humiliated 3 weeks ago. Let me prove it. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, jaw tight. Then he turned to Marcus. Get our own cameras down there, document everything, and have legal on standby. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Lorenzo grabbed his jacket. You're not doing this alone, he said. They took the elevator down in tense silence. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She'd faced Catherine before and survived. She could do it again. The lobby was chaos. Catherine stood in the center like a general commanding troops, perfectly dressed in a cream suit, her hair immaculate. 3 reporters with cameras flanked her, along with what looked like a small crowd of onlookers who'd gathered to watch the show. Building security hovered nearby, uncertain. Catherine's eyes locked on Emily the moment the elevator doors opened. Her smile was pure venom. There she is, Catherine announced loudly. The woman who destroyed my family. Emily stepped forward, Lorenzo at her side. Every camera swung toward them. Mrs. Whitmore, Emily said calmly, this is private property. You need to leave. Private property bought with what? My son's broken heart? My husband's ruined career? Catherine's voice carried across the lobby. You seduced a vulnerable man, convinced him to humiliate my family, and now you're living in luxury while we lose everything. That's an interesting version of events, Emily said. Not accurate, but interesting. You were a waitress, a nobody, and now look at you playing dress-up in expensive clothes, pretending to be something you're not. The words were designed to cut, to make Emily feel small again. A month ago, they would have worked, but Emily had spent 3 weeks learning how to armor herself against exactly this kind of attack. I was a waitress, Emily agreed. I worked honest jobs, paid my own bills, supported my family. What were you doing, Mrs. Whitmore? Oh, right, spending money your husband embezzled while looking down on people like me. Catherine's face flushed. How dare you? No, how dare you? Emily stepped closer, her voice steady. You spent 3 years making me feel worthless, criticizing everything about me, my clothes, my job, my background. You convinced your son I wasn't good enough for him, then orchestrated my public humiliation like it was entertainment. And now you have the nerve to show up here and play the victim? My husband resigned because of you. Your husband resigned because he broke the law. Lorenzo just made sure he faced consequences for once in his privileged life. The cameras were eating this up. Emily could see the reporters' excitement, the way they were recording every word. This would be everywhere within the hour. She had to be careful, had to stay controlled. Catherine took a different approach, her voice dropping to something almost pleading. Daniel loved you. He made a mistake at the wedding, yes, but he loved you, and you threw that away for... She gestured at Lorenzo with disgust. For money, for revenge. You're no better than we are. You're right, Emily said quietly. Daniel did love me, in his own way. But it wasn't enough to stand up to you. It wasn't enough to choose me over his family's approval. So when he left me at that altar, he made his choice, and I made mine. By marrying a man you don't even know? Emily glanced at Lorenzo. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, but there was something there, pride maybe, trust. I know him better than I ever knew your son, Emily said. Lorenzo doesn't pretend to be something he's not. He doesn't make promises he can't keep, and he's never once made me feel like I should apologize for existing. Catherine's composure cracked. You destroyed everything we built. No, you destroyed yourselves. I just stopped being your victim. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Catherine stared at Emily like she was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not the meek girl she'd spent years dismissing. This isn't over, Catherine said finally. Yes, it is. Lorenzo spoke for the first time, his voice cold. You have 5 seconds to leave this building before I have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. Your choice. Catherine looked between them, calculating. Then she turned to the reporters with a wounded expression that would have been convincing if Emily hadn't seen the rage beneath it. You all saw this, Catherine said to the cameras. They threatened me, silenced me. This is what happens when you speak truth to power. She swept out of the lobby, her entourage following. The reporters lingered, shouting questions, but security ushered them out. Within minutes, the lobby was empty again, just marble and silence. Emily's legs suddenly felt weak. She grabbed Lorenzo's arm to steady herself. You okay? He asked quietly. I think so. Did I just make everything worse? No, you handled her perfectly. Marcus approached, phone in hand. It's already online. The footage, clips, everything. You're trending. Is that good or bad? Emily asked. Depends on the comments. Marcus scrolled, reading. Mostly good, actually. People are calling Catherine out for harassing you. There's a whole thread about her hypocrisy, coming after you for marrying Lorenzo when her family stole millions. He paused, grinned. It's actually pretty brutal. Emily felt something unknot in her chest. Really? Really? Public opinion is on your side. Catherine just made herself look desperate and vindictive. Lorenzo took Emily's hand, pulled her toward the elevator. Come on, let's get out of here. They rode up in silence. Emily could feel adrenaline draining from her system, leaving her shaky and exhausted. When they reached the penthouse, she collapsed on the couch while Lorenzo poured drinks. That was terrifying, Emily said. But you didn't back down. Lorenzo handed her a glass. You stood your ground. I wanted to run. Every instinct was screaming at me to get away from her. But you didn't. That's what matters. Emily sipped her drink, the warmth spreading through her chest. She really thought she could intimidate me, like I'd just crumble the way I used to. People don't update their assumptions easily. Catherine still sees you as the girl who took abuse without fighting back. She has no idea who you've become. Do you? Emily asked. Know who I've become? Lorenzo sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. I'm starting to. The air between them shifted, charged with something Emily couldn't name. They'd been living together for 3 weeks, working side by side, sharing space and strategy. But there'd always been distance, an understanding that this was temporary, professional. Except it didn't feel professional right now. Lorenzo, Emily started, not sure what she was going to say. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He answered with a curse, listened, his expression darkening. When? A pause. I'll be right there. He hung up, already standing. I have to go. Business emergency. What kind of emergency? The kind I can't discuss. He grabbed his jacket. Marcus will be here if you need anything. Don't leave the building without security. Lorenzo, wait! But he was already gone, the door closing behind him with a solid click. Emily sat alone in the too-quiet penthouse, her drink warming in her hand, wondering what had just almost happened between them. The next few days settled into an uneasy rhythm. Lorenzo disappeared for long stretches, taking meetings Emily wasn't invited to, making calls behind closed doors. When he was around, he was distant, distracted. Emily tried not to feel dismissed, but old insecurities crept back in. She filled the time working through the files Lorenzo had compiled on families like the Whitmores, the Morrisons, who'd displaced 300 families to build luxury condos, the Kincaids, whose pharmaceutical company had jacked up prices on life-saving medications, the Rousseaus, who ran a chain of private prisons and lobbied for harsher sentencing to keep them full. Each file was a catalog of casual cruelty, the kind that happened when people had enough money and power to insulate themselves from consequences. Reading them made Emily's blood boil. She started making notes, building cases the way Lorenzo had taught her. Find the leverage, identify the pressure points, plan the takedown. It was satisfying work, righteous in a way nothing else in her life had ever been. Rachel called on the fourth day. Have you seen the latest about the Whitmores? No. What happened? Daniel's engagement to some socialite named Victoria Sterling. They announced it this morning. Emily pulled up the news on her laptop. There was Daniel, smiling at a blonde woman in a designer dress. The two of them posed in front of what looked like her family's estate. The headline read, Daniel Whitmore moves on. Engagement announced 3 weeks after wedding scandal. Emily stared at the photo, waiting for the hurt to come. But all she felt was a distant curiosity, like looking at a stranger's life. You okay? Rachel asked. Yeah, actually I am. Really? Because you can be honest with me. I know, but I'm serious. Looking at him now, I don't even recognize the person I was when we were together. It's like watching a movie about someone else's life. That's probably healthy, Rachel said carefully. Or deeply concerning. I'm not sure which. Emily laughed. Little bit of both, maybe. They talked for a while longer about nothing important. Rachel's job, her girlfriend, the weird guy who'd moved in downstairs. Normal stuff that felt grounding after weeks of chaos. When Emily hung up, she found Lorenzo in the doorway, watching her. How long have you been standing there? She asked. Long enough. You saw about Daniel? Yeah. How do you feel about it? Emily considered the question honestly. Relieved, I think. He's someone else's problem now. Lorenzo crossed the room, sat on the arm of the couch. I owe you an apology. For what? I've been distant this week, preoccupied. That's not fair to you. Is something wrong? He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words. I've been trying to figure out what happens next. With us. Emily's heart stuttered. What do you mean? This arrangement. It was supposed to be temporary. Get revenge, give you resources to start over, then part ways clean. But that's not what's happening. Lorenzo met her eyes. You're building a life here, taking on cases, making plans. And He stopped, frustrated. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. That makes two of us, Emily said quietly. The smart thing would be to stick to the original plan. Set an end date, make it clean. Is that what you want? No. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Emily's pulse hammered in her throat. Then what do you want? She asked. Lorenzo stood, paced to the window. I want you to stay. Not as an arrangement or a business partner. Just stay. As what? I don't know. We'd figure it out. He turned to face her. But I need to know if that's something you'd even consider. Because if not, I need to start protecting myself now before this gets messier. Emily stood, crossed the room to him. You're asking if I have feelings for you. Do you? She thought about the past 3 weeks. The way Lorenzo pushed her to be stronger while never making her feel weak. The way he'd stood beside her against Catherine without trying to take over. The late nights working side by side, the quiet moments that felt more intimate than anything she'd shared with Daniel. I don't know, Emily said honestly. Everything's been so intense, I can't tell what's real and what's just adrenaline and trauma bonding. That's fair. But I know I don't want to leave, not yet. Something eased in Lorenzo's expression. Okay. We'll figure it out. No pressure, no timeline. Just see where this goes. Emily nodded, relief and terror mixing in equal measure. They were venturing into territory neither of them knew how to navigate, but maybe that was okay. Maybe figuring it out together was the whole point. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting. What? Emily asked. Senator Graves, he wants a meeting. The one who replaced Whitmore? Yeah, he's asking about our files on the Morrison family. Lorenzo showed her the message. He wants to discuss potential legislation to protect tenants from predatory developers. Emily stared at the phone. He wants to actually help? Looks like it, or he's smart enough to see which way the wind is blowing and wants to get ahead of it. Either way, it's something. Lorenzo pocketed his phone, a rare smile crossing his face. You remember what you said on the roof? About helping people, not just destroying the ones who hurt us? Yeah. I think we just found our first real opportunity. The meeting with Senator Graves happened 2 days later in his downtown office. Emily wore one of Vanessa's power suits, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind of thing that made people take you seriously. Lorenzo walked beside her in charcoal gray, and together they looked like exactly what they were, a force to be reckoned with. Graves was younger than Emily expected, maybe early 40s, with an earnest quality that seemed genuine but could have been practiced. He stood when they entered, shook both their hands with firm grips. Thank you for coming, Graves said. I know this is unorthodox. We're used to unorthodox, Lorenzo replied. They sat around a conference table. Graves pulled out a folder, slid it across to them. I've been reviewing housing legislation for the past month, Graves said. The Morrison situation you exposed, it's not isolated. There are dozens of developers using the same tactics across the state, buying buildings, forcing out low-income tenants, converting to luxury units. It's legal, but it's destroying communities. Emily opened the folder, scanned the documents. Statistics, case studies, projected displacement numbers. It was worse than she'd thought. Why are you telling us this? She asked. Because you have something I don't. Leverage. You've proven you can take down powerful families when they cross the line. I want to propose a partnership. Lorenzo leaned back. What kind of partnership? You identify the worst offenders, gather evidence of illegal practices, fraud, bribery, code violations. I use that evidence to push legislation with teeth. We create real consequences for this behavior instead of just moving the problem around. And you get to look like a hero, Lorenzo said, not unkindly. I get to do my job, Graves corrected. Which, yes, will probably help my career, but I'm also tired of watching people get crushed by a system designed to protect wealth over humanity. So if my ambition and your anger can create something useful, I'm willing to try. Emily studied him, trying to gauge sincerity. He could be playing them, using their work to boost his profile while planning to betray them later. But he could also be genuine. And either way, the work itself would help people. What's the first target? Emily asked. Graves looked surprised, then pleased. The Morrison family is expanding into the waterfront district. They've already bought 3 buildings and started eviction proceedings on current tenants. If we move fast, we can document their methods and use it to push emergency tenant protection legislation. Lorenzo glanced at Emily. She could see the question in his eyes. Was she sure about this? She nodded. We're in, Lorenzo said. But we do this our way. You don't get to control the investigation or dictate our methods. Fair enough. I'll take what you give me and run with it. They spent the next hour hammering out details, communication protocols, timelines, legal boundaries. By the time they left, Emily's head was spinning, but her chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. We're actually doing this, she said in the car, helping people. Don't get too idealistic. Graves might screw us over. Maybe. But even if he does, we'll still have the evidence. We can always release it ourselves. Lorenzo looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You're good at this. At what? Strategy. Seeing angles I miss. You've learned fast. The compliment warmed Emily more than it should have. I had a good teacher. I'm serious. You're not just helping anymore. You're leading. And you're better at the human side of this than I am. Graves trusted you more than he trusted me. That's because I'm less terrifying. Debatable. They spent the next 2 weeks deep in Morrison family business. Emily coordinated with tenant groups in the waterfront district, collecting stories and documentation. Lorenzo's investigators dug into financial records, finding patterns of bribery and code violation cover-ups. Together, they built a case that was airtight and damning. Working together felt natural in a way Emily hadn't expected. They'd developed a rhythm, Lorenzo handling the financial and legal angles while Emily managed the human element. They'd work late into the night at the dining table, laptops and papers scattered between them, coffee going cold while they pieced together connections. Sometimes their hands would brush reaching for the same document. Sometimes Emily would look up and find Lorenzo already watching her. The tension between them was still there, unresolved but not uncomfortable, like a question neither of them was ready to answer yet. On the 15th night, Emily fell asleep at the table, her head pillowed on a stack of tenant interviews. She woke up hours later in her bed, still fully dressed, with no memory of getting there. Lorenzo must have carried her. The thought made her chest tight. She found him still working in the living room, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked up when she appeared. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. Can't. We're meeting Graves tomorrow with the final presentation. I want to make sure everything's perfect. Emily sat beside him, looked at the laptop screen. It was a comprehensive breakdown of Morrison family crimes. Bribery, fraud, intimidation, dozens of code violations ignored through paid-off inspectors. It's already perfect, she said. You're just nervous. I don't get nervous. Liar. Lorenzo smiled despite himself. Okay, maybe a little nervous. This is different than the Whitmores. This isn't just revenge. It's actually trying to change something systemic. What if we fail? Then we try again. But Lorenzo, look at what we've built. This is solid. Graves would be an idiot not to use it. And if he is an idiot, then we leak it ourselves and force his hand. Lorenzo closed the laptop, turned to face her fully. When did you get so ruthless? I learned from the best. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the city was dark except for scattered lights, windows glowing like small fires. Emily thought about all the people in those buildings, living their lives, trying to survive in a system rigged against them. People like her father, like Lorenzo's father, like she used to be. Thank you, Emily said quietly. For what? For this, for showing me I could fight back, for making me believe I was worth more than what the Whitmores told me I was worth. Lorenzo's expression softened. You always were worth more. You just needed to see it yourself. He reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, careful, and Emily's breath caught. They were inches apart, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. Emily, he said softly. Yeah? I think I'm falling for you, and I don't know what to do about it. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. I think I'm falling for you too, she admitted, and it terrifies me. Why? Because last time I let myself care about someone, he destroyed me in front of hundreds of people. And you're, she gestured helplessly, you're more intense than Daniel ever was. If this goes wrong, I don't know if I'd survive it. I would never hurt you like that. You can't promise that. Nobody can. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. I can't promise I won't hurt you. People hurt each other, even when they don't mean to. But I can promise I'll never humiliate you. I'll never make you feel small. And I'll never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. That's a pretty good promise. It's all I've got. She leaned forward, closed the distance between them, and kissed him. It wasn't like the brief performative kiss at their wedding. This was real, slow and searching, a question and an answer all at once. Lorenzo's hand came up to cup her face, gentle, despite his strength, and Emily felt something settle into place inside her chest. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. So, Lorenzo said. What now? Emily laughed, a little shaky. I have no idea, but maybe we figure it out together? I can work with that. They sat there for a while longer, Lorenzo's arm around her shoulders, Emily's head resting against his chest. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent to the small revolution happening in the penthouse above it. But up here, everything had changed. Tomorrow, they'd take down the Morrisons. They'd start building something better. Tonight, they'd just be two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to hold on. The presentation to Senator Graves went better than Emily dared hope. They sat in his office with 3 attorneys, 2 housing advocates, and a representative from the state attorney general's office while Lorenzo walked through the Morrison evidence with surgical precision. Emily handled the human testimony, sharing stories from tenants who'd been harassed, threatened, and illegally evicted. By the end, Graves was on his feet, pacing. This is explosive. We can fast-track emergency legislation based on this. How fast? Emily asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'll need to bring in co-sponsors, but with this evidence, they'll jump on board. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this. Lorenzo gathered their materials. We'll continue monitoring the Morrison properties. If they retaliate against any of the tenants who spoke to us, they won't get the chance, Graves interrupted. I'm requesting an immediate investigation. Their operations will be frozen pending review. Emily felt something unfurl in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. They were actually doing this, making a difference that went beyond personal revenge. As they left the building, Lorenzo took her hand without thinking, then seemed to realize what he'd done and started to pull away. Emily held on tighter. Don't, she said. People will see. Let them. They walked to the car like that, hands linked, and Emily didn't care who noticed or what conclusions they drew. The arranged marriage had stopped being an arrangement somewhere along the way, and pretending otherwise felt exhausting. The media coverage of the Morrison investigation was relentless. Within 48 hours, 3 major outlets had published exposés on predatory development practices. The tenant advocacy groups Emily had worked with were everywhere, giving interviews, sharing their stories. Morrison family lawyers scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. The evidence was public, and public opinion had turned decisively against them. Emily watched it unfold from the penthouse, tracking news alerts on her laptop, while Lorenzo fielded calls from journalists, attorneys, and other senators who suddenly wanted to discuss housing reform. They'd opened a door and people were flooding through it. This is bigger than I expected, Emily said during a rare quiet moment. Lorenzo looked up from his phone. Second thoughts? No, just processing. A month ago I was serving coffee. Now I'm helping reshape housing policy. You're good at it. I'm winging it, mostly. So is everyone else. They're just better at hiding it. Lorenzo set down his phone, came to sit beside her. You know, the Morrisons are going to come after us, right? Once they realize they can't stop the investigation, they'll try to discredit us instead. Let them try. I'm serious, Emily. They'll dig into your past, looking for anything they can use. The wedding, your family, every mistake you've ever made. Emily thought about that. A month ago, the idea of people scrutinizing her life would have sent her into a panic spiral. But now, she'd already survived the worst public humiliation imaginable. What else could they do to her? I've got nothing to hide, she said. I worked honest jobs, paid my bills, took care of my sister. If they want to paint that as scandalous, they're welcome to try. Lorenzo smiled, genuine and warm. You've come a long way. I had good motivation. They fell into their new routine over the following weeks, working cases during the day, existing as something more than partners at night. It wasn't a traditional relationship by any measure. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still approached their personal connection with the same caution they'd used defusing a bomb. But there were stolen moments that felt real. Lorenzo's hand on her back as they reviewed documents. Emily falling asleep on his shoulder while watching late-night news coverage. Quiet conversations in the pre-dawn hours when neither of them could sleep. Rachel noticed during one of their weekly coffee dates. You're different, Rachel said, studying Emily across the table. Different how? Happier, more settled, less like you're waiting for everything to fall apart. Emily considered that. I guess I stopped expecting disaster at every turn. Because of Lorenzo? Because of me. Lorenzo he showed me I could be different, But I'm the one who chose to actually change. Rachel stirred her coffee, choosing words carefully. Are you in love with him? The question should have been simple, yes or no. But Emily's feelings for Lorenzo existed in complicated territory. Gratitude mixed with attraction, respect tangled up with genuine affection. Was that love? She didn't know. She'd thought she loved Daniel once, and look how that turned out. I don't know, Emily admitted. But I know I want him in my life. That counts for something. It counts for a lot, actually. Rachel reached across the table, squeezed her hand. I'm glad you're okay. I was worried for a while there. I was worried too, but I think... Emily paused, trying to articulate something she'd only recently understood. I think I'm finally becoming the person I was supposed to be before I started shrinking myself to fit other people's expectations. Rachel smiled. That person is pretty badass. The Morrison legislation passed 3 weeks later with overwhelming bipartisan support. Emily and Lorenzo watched the vote from the penthouse, champagne already open because they'd known it would pass. Graves had done the political work brilliantly, building a coalition too strong to oppose. When the final tally came through, 42-8, Emily felt tears sting her eyes. We did it, she whispered. Lorenzo pulled her into his arms, held her tight. You did it. This was your idea, your heart. I just provided resources. We did it together. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped up in each other and the knowledge that they'd actually changed something. 300 families would keep their homes. Predatory developers would face real consequences. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Lorenzo pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and terrifying. Emily's breath caught. You don't have to say it back, Lorenzo continued. I just needed you to know. This stopped being an arrangement for me weeks ago. Maybe it never really was one. Emily thought about the man who'd found her crying in that cathedral courtyard, who'd offered her an impossible choice. She thought about how he'd challenged her, protected her, pushed her to be stronger while never making her feel weak. How he'd kept every promise, even the ones he hadn't explicitly made. I love you too, she said, and meant it. I probably have for a while. I was just scared to admit it. Scared of what? Of needing someone again. Of giving them the power to hurt me. Lorenzo's thumb traced her cheekbone. I can't promise I won't hurt you, but I can promise I'll never leave you the way he did, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving you were right to trust me. Emily kissed him, deep and sure, and felt the last of her armor fall away. This was real. Messy and complicated and completely unexpected, but real. They made love that night for the first time, tentative and intense, learning each other's bodies the way they'd learned each other's minds. Afterward, Emily lay in Lorenzo's bed, their bed now, she supposed, with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. What happens next? She asked quietly. What do you mean? With us. With everything. We've taken down the Whitmores, helped pass the Morrison legislation. What's our next move? Lorenzo's hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I've been thinking about that. I want to formalize what we're doing, create an actual foundation dedicated to helping people fight back against systems designed to crush them. Emily lifted her head to look at him. A foundation? Legal aid, investigative resources, political advocacy, everything we've been doing, but structured and sustainable, so it doesn't depend on just us staying angry and motivated. Emily felt her throat tighten. That's brilliant, and it's exactly what your father would have wanted. Lorenzo's expression went soft. Yeah, I think he would have liked that, and he would have liked you. Tell me about him. Really tell me, not just the business failure parts. So Lorenzo did. He talked for an hour about his father, a man who'd believed in honest work and fair dealing, who'd taught his son to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. A man who'd been destroyed by people like the Whitmores, but had never let bitterness poison his heart. He used to say that anger was useful fuel, but it was a terrible destination, Lorenzo said. For years, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought anger was the whole point. Stay angry, get powerful, make them pay. But now I get it. The anger got us here. But it can't be what keeps us here. So what does keep us here? Emily asked. Hope, I think. The belief that we can actually build something better. Emily kissed him again, slow and sweet. Then let's build it. They spent the next 2 months laying groundwork for the foundation. Lorenzo handled the legal and financial structures while Emily worked with community organizers and advocacy groups to identify the people who needed help most. They hired a small staff, investigators, attorneys, community liaisons, and found office space in a building that had once belonged to one of the families they'd taken down. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Rachel came to visit during the setup phase, bringing her girlfriend Maya to see Emily's new world. They stood in the foundation offices while workers installed desks and phone systems, and Rachel looked around with something like awe. "This is insane," Rachel said. "You built all this in 2 months?" "Lorenzo did most of the heavy lifting," Emily said. "I just helped direct where it should go." "Don't sell yourself short," Maya said. She worked in nonprofit management and knew the space well. "The partnerships you've formed, the community trust you've built. That's the hardest part. Anyone can throw money at a problem. Making people believe you'll actually help them, that takes real work." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. For years, she'd measured her worth by other people's approval. Daniel's, Catherine's, the Whitmores' entire social circle. But now she was building something that mattered on her own terms, with people who respected her for who she was, not what she could pretend to be. "We're planning an official launch in 3 weeks," Emily said. "Big event, press coverage, the whole thing. You should come." "Obviously we're coming," Rachel said. "I want to watch my sister save the world." "I'm not saving anything, just trying to make it slightly less awful." "Same difference." The night before the foundation launch, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Lorenzo, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything that could go wrong. What if nobody showed up? What if the press coverage was negative? What if the whole thing was a disaster and they'd wasted months of work on something nobody wanted? Lorenzo's hand found hers in the darkness. "Stop spiraling." "How did you know I was spiraling?" "You get this specific breathing pattern. Short, quick, like you're trying not to hyperventilate." Emily turned to face him. "What if we're wrong? What if people don't actually want help? They just want to complain about the system without changing anything? Then we'll have built something for the people who do want to change things, and that's enough." Lorenzo pulled her closer. "Stop looking for reasons this will fail. We've done good work. Trust it." "I'm trying." "Try harder." Emily laughed despite herself, some of the tension easing. "You're not good at pep talks." "I'm excellent at pep talks. You're just resistant to positivity." "Fair point." They lay there in comfortable silence for a while. Emily thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, broken, humiliated, convinced her life was over. That woman would never have believed she'd end up here, building something meaningful with a man who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. "Lorenzo," she said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you for finding me that day, for offering me a way out. Thank you for taking it. I was terrified you'd say no, and I'd have to watch you disappear into nothing." "Were you really watching me before the wedding? That wasn't just a line?" Lorenzo hesitated, then admitted, "I'd been investigating the Whitmores for 8 months. Your engagement to Daniel was in the files. I saw your photo and—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "I saw someone who was trying so hard to belong somewhere she'd never be accepted. It reminded me of my father, actually, and when I found out what Catherine was planning, I couldn't just let it happen." Emily processed this. "So, you were my knight in shining armor? I was a man with a revenge plot who needed a partner. You just happened to be perfect for the role. And now? Now you're the person I can't imagine my life without." Lorenzo kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." Emily closed her eyes, but sleep still felt impossible. So instead she thought about the foundation launch, about all the people they'd help, about the future they were building together. Somewhere in the middle of planning her remarks for tomorrow's speech, she finally drifted off. The foundation launch exceeded every expectation. 200 people packed the event space. Community organizers, journalists, politicians, and dozens of people who'd been helped by the Morrison legislation. Senator Graves gave a speech. The tenant advocates Emily had worked with shared their stories, and when Emily stepped up to the podium to speak, she felt the weight of every eye in the room. 6 months ago, Emily began, I was a different person living a different life. I thought I knew what success looked like. Marry the right person, live in the right neighborhood, get accepted by the right people. But I was wrong. Success isn't about fitting into someone else's vision. It's about building something real that helps people who actually need it. She talked about Lorenzo's father, about her own journey from waitress to advocate, about the belief that systems could change if enough people demanded it. She talked about anger as fuel and hope as destination, and by the time she finished, half the room was crying. Lorenzo found her afterward, pulled her into a fierce hug. You were perfect. I was terrified. Didn't show. Rachel pushed through the crowd, Maya right behind her. That was incredible, Em. I'm so proud of you. Emily hugged her sister tight, overwhelmed by emotion she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or gratitude. Or just the profound relief of finally becoming someone she didn't have to apologize for. The foundation hit the ground running. Within the first month, they took on 15 cases. Families facing illegal eviction, workers being exploited by employers, small business owners crushed by corporate monopolies. Emily coordinated the community outreach while Lorenzo handled legal strategy, and together they started winning. Not every case. Some they lost, or had to compromise on, or couldn't help at all because the system was too broken. But enough. They won enough to matter. Emily ran into Daniel Whitmore exactly once, 3 months after the foundation launch. She was leaving a community meeting in a neighborhood his family used to own when she saw him getting out of a modest sedan. Nothing like the luxury cars he used to drive. He spotted her at the same time, and for a moment they just stared at each other across the parking lot. Then Daniel walked over, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Emily, he said. Daniel. Awkward silence stretched between them. Daniel looked different, older maybe, or just tired. The easy confidence he'd always worn like armor was gone, replaced by something uncertain. I saw the news about your foundation, he said finally. It's good work. Thanks. He stopped, started again. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the one my father forced me to give. What I did at our wedding was cruel and cowardly, and you didn't deserve it. Emily studied him, trying to find anger or hurt or anything strong enough to hold on to. But all she felt was distant curiosity, like looking at a character in a story she'd finished reading. You're right, she said. I didn't deserve it. But honestly, Daniel, you did me a favor. If you'd actually married me, I'd probably still be trying to make myself smaller to fit your family's expectations. So thanks, I guess, for being such a spectacular asshole that I had no choice but to walk away. Daniel flinched. That's fair. How's Victoria? We broke up. Turns out she was more interested in the Whitmore name than in me, and once the name didn't mean much anymore. He shrugged. I'm working at my uncle's firm now. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work. Good for you. Another silence. Then Daniel said, Are you happy? With Lorenzo? Emily thought about waking up next to Lorenzo this morning, about the quiet breakfast they'd shared before diving into the day's work, about the life they were building together brick by careful brick. Yeah, she said. I am. I'm glad. Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, but settled for, Take care of yourself, Emily. You too. She watched him walk away, get back in his modest car, drive off into whatever future he was building. And Emily felt nothing but relief that it wasn't her future anymore. Lorenzo proposed on a random Tuesday 6 months after the foundation launch. They were in the office late, working on a case involving a factory that had been dumping chemicals into a low-income neighborhood's water supply. Emily was buried in medical reports when Lorenzo suddenly said, Marry me. She looked up, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me. For real this time. Not an arrangement or a business deal, just us. Emily stared at him. We're already married. Legally, yes, but that marriage was about revenge and survival. I want to marry you because I love you and can't imagine my life without you. Lorenzo came around the desk, knelt beside her chair. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know it's because we both chose this, not because we were running from something worse. Lorenzo, I don't have a ring yet. I wasn't planning this, but I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I realized I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. This is the moment. Us, exhausted, covered in case files, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. This is who we are. And I want to choose us, every single day. Emily felt tears spill down her cheeks. That might be the least romantic proposal in history. Probably, but it's honest. I love you, Emily said. And yes, obviously yes. Lorenzo kissed her, deep and thorough, and Emily tasted salt from her own tears. When they finally pulled apart, they were both grinning like idiots. We should probably finish this case first, Emily said. Definitely. Can't let romance interfere with justice. Spoken like a true romantic. They had a real wedding 3 months later. Small, intimate, just family and close friends in the rooftop garden where they decided to become partners. Rachel stood as Emily's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Senator Graves officiated, because he'd become a genuine friend over the months of working together. And when Lorenzo and Emily exchanged vows they'd written themselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. I promise to challenge you when you're wrong, Emily said, to support you when you're right, and to love you even when we're both exhausted and covered in case files. Lorenzo smiled. I promise to see you, really see you, every single day, to never make you feel small, and to keep choosing us, for as long as you'll have me. Forever sounds good, Emily said. Forever it is. The foundation grew over the following years. They expanded to 3 offices, hired 50 people, helped thousands of families. Emily became a recognized voice in housing advocacy, testifying before legislative committees and training new organizers. Lorenzo channeled his business acumen into sustainable growth, ensuring the foundation would outlast their direct involvement. They won some battles and lost others. The system didn't transform overnight. Powerful families still crushed vulnerable people. Corruption still ran deep, and sometimes their best efforts weren't enough. But they kept fighting, kept building, kept choosing hope over cynicism. Emily ran into Catherine Whitmore one last time, 5 years after that first confrontation. It was at a charity gala, the kind Emily used to be excluded from but now attended as an invited speaker. Catherine looked older, diminished somehow, her designer clothes unable to hide the defeat in her eyes. They didn't speak, just looked at each other across the crowded ballroom, 2 women whose lives had collided and diverged in ways neither could have predicted. Then Catherine turned away, and Emily let her go. There was no satisfaction in Catherine's fall, Emily realized. No triumph worth celebrating, just the quiet knowledge that she'd survived, built something meaningful, and become someone she could respect. Later that night, back in the penthouse that had become a real home, Emily stood at the windows looking out at the city. Lorenzo came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is from that day you found me in the cathedral courtyard." "Better or worse?" Emily leaned back against him, solid and warm and real. "Better. So much better. No regrets?" She thought about it honestly. The revenge, the transformation, the ruthless dismantling of people who'd hurt them. Some of it had been necessary. Some had probably crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. But all of it had led here, to this life they'd built together. "No regrets," she said finally. "Not about the important parts." "What parts are those?" "Taking your hand when you offered it. Choosing to fight instead of disappear. Becoming someone strong enough to help other people do the same." Emily turned in his arms, looked up at him. "And falling in love with you, even though it scared me to death." Lorenzo kissed her softly. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best. The first was burning that wedding dress." He laughed, and Emily felt the sound vibrate through her chest where they were pressed together. This was home, she realized. Not the penthouse or the foundation or the carefully constructed life they'd built. Just this. Being seen and loved and chosen by someone who never asked her to be anything but exactly who she was. "Come to bed," Lorenzo said. "We've got that meeting with the governor tomorrow about the statewide tenant protection bill." "Always working," Emily teased. "You love it." "I love you." "Same thing." They walked to their bedroom together, leaving the city lights behind. Tomorrow, they'd keep fighting, keep building, keep choosing hope. But tonight was just theirs, two people who'd found each other in wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Emily had learned a lot in the 5 years since Daniel left her at that altar. She'd learned that strength wasn't about never being hurt, but about getting up after you were knocked down. She'd learned that revenge could be fuel, but it was a terrible destination. She'd learned that real power wasn't about crushing your enemies, but about lifting up the people they'd tried to break. Most importantly, she'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone who completed you. It was about finding someone who challenged you to complete yourself, then choosing to build something together that was bigger than either of you alone. The girl who'd stood in that cathedral in her ivory dress wouldn't recognize the woman Emily had become. And that was exactly the point. She'd stopped trying to fit into someone else's story and started writing her own. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no perfect ending, no guarantee that everything would work out forever. But it was real and hard-won, and hers. And that made it better than any fantasy she'd ever believed in. Emily Carter. DeLuca fell asleep that night next to the man who'd found her at her lowest point and shown her how to rise. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she'd finally found the thing she'd been searching for all along. Not acceptance, not approval, not even love, though that mattered too. She'd found herself. Strong and flawed and ruthlessly compassionate, building a life that actually mattered. And that, Emily thought as sleep pulled her under, was the best revenge of all.